Welcome. I'm here with one of my all-time favorite people and amazing artist, Megan Morrison. She is a talented artist based out of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you for having me. I've very much missed our long conversations that we've had in the past, so this is a nice way to kill a couple birds with a stone. Same stone, right? Why did I mess up that saying? It's so easy.
Do you want to restart? Is that?
No.
I think that's perfect. I think that so Megan has been my friend for almost 10 years now, probably more than 10 years. I don't know.
Gosh, yeah. We inhabited the same town for a very long period, which I'm kind of looking out over now. Right now, I can see out my window. I can see one of the alleys that's boxed in between like 4th and 5th Street and Geary. Around there, you know exactly what I'm talking.
I do, yeah. So one of the reasons that I really admire Megan and just I think that she's such a radiant of light in this world is that she's someone who's always delving inwards and talking about her own practice and always exploring herself. And I think that right now everyone is kind of forced to do that and freaking out about it. I'm freaking out about it. I'm stuck at home like, oh my God. But I think that Megan is kind of an expert at that field. And I really want to share her perspective with you guys.
Oh, awesome. It's really interesting that you use the word expert because that's actually a word that came up for me when I was writing about this the other day. I was kind of just trying to get my head in the right space to talk about my practice and my work and everything. And I think one of the things, I started by kind of writing down the things that I believe about my work, things that I know to be true that resonate with me. And one of those things that I feel like I really know, it vibrates inside of me is that I feel like the only thing that you can really even attempt to be an expert on is yourself. That's the only thing we really have the capacity to delve into in that way, and that fully. And I think by diving into ourselves and really examining those really micro specific elements of ourself, at least for me, when I create, it's when I find those really specific moments that I'm actually speaking the most generally. And I'm actually connecting the most with people outside of myself. Like we connect with each other by turning in. And I think of that not just in a creative way as an artist, but also as a human being, as a yogi in my meditation practice. You turn inward to rekindle and acknowledge that light inside of yourself, because that's that divine light in you that's the same in me and you. And when we're in that, we're together. That's namaste. That's acknowledging our wholeness in ourselves and our connection to each other. And boy, are we being presented with the opportunity to do that right now.
Yeah, I completely understand. Tell me a little bit, when did you first start getting interested in art?
Man, I think I've probably my whole life, I always have been drawn to creative processes. My mother, though I don't think she would ever define herself as an artist, is a very creative person. She was a musical theater minor and did community theater when I was growing up. I remember being like backstage at a community theater and like burning my hand on her curling iron while she was on stage, and like a lot of memories of stuff like that with her. I was always like drawing and painting. My mom said I would and I was very really quick. Like I'd whip out like 50 pieces in a sitting, and she'd be like, how about we add a little bit more to this paper? And I'd be like, no, it's done. That's it. Hang it up. We very quickly ran out of wall space, which hasn't really gotten any better as I've gotten any older and decided to work larger and every different way. I have really vivid memories as a child of spending hours like drawing while my dad read to my brother and I. So like I've found in my practice, even as an adult, I really love audiobooks because it takes me back to that, like there's a tinge of nostalgia to me, even though it's not the same stories that my dad read. Just having someone read to me while I work and while I'm being creative, it gives me a space to open up and explore.
Beautiful. Do you feel like there's a nostalgia in your practice?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think like anyone, you know, there's a lot of things in life that as you grow up are kind of force you to lose touch with like the play and the just like the sheer joy we experience as children that we're able to, because we don't have all these other thoughts bombarding us and taking us away from that. And I think through making and art, I'm able to reconnect with that kind of playfulness, and not focus so much on something being right, which as like someone with a bit of a perfectionist streak is really hard to set that aside.
When did you first start to realize that art could become a career for you, or like you want to pursue this more than just like you want to go to art school, or when did it become real for you? Not to like talk in those terms.
Yeah, no. So for me, I grew up, my grandmother loved museums. She was always taking me to museums. So I was like aware and privy to art as this profession. And I think it was in a way very like idealized within my family, like different mediums probably for each family member. But like my father was really, really into music, and like, you know, there's like this like pedestal you place these creative people on. My dad comes from a really intellectual background. He grew up right outside of Boston in Wellesley, where he actually went to the same high school as Sylvia Plath, who's like one of my favorite poets. So that's always this nice little like caveat. And him and my uncle and my aunt, both of my grandparents all went to Harvard, very intellectual,
I didn't know that actually.
beautiful, big, open liberals. Love them. But, you know, I think with it, all being big readers and admirers of that, my great grandmother was a poet. I don't know. There was an appreciation within my family for it, and that's actually something I think that I didn't realize until I was in high school that everyone else didn't have. Because for me, it was always like I was raised very fortunately to do what I love. My parents, like, I remember my father saying around me at a very young age, like, all he really wanted for me in my life was for me to be happy and healthy. Like, he didn't want me to go to Harvard just like him if that's not what I wanted to do. It totally wasn't what I wanted to do, and there was absolutely no way I was ever going to get into Harvard. Very different situation nowadays versus then, but that's a whole other story. So it was always there for me as something I really enjoyed, and I was encouraged to explore. And for myself, I just kind of always knew deep down that like art was like breathing for me. Making things, whether that was painting or drawing or sewing or knitting or the way you put together a meal. I can't imagine life without it. So it only seemed natural to follow that and pursue that, I guess.
So let's keep it here. Your teenage years right now, your kind of formative years. What ideas were you pursuing in your art?
The same ideas I was pursuing in my adolescent life. So my relation to everyone around me, who I was, what my body was, especially in relation to everything around me. I was doing just kind of a lot of, I think that then too meant I was doing a lot of figurative work. It's a lot of figure drawing. I was really drawn to like Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele, and I love the Impressionists because I love the color, and Matisse. I saw a beautiful like Matisse Picasso joint show with my grandmother when I was like, I think like 15, and then slowly moved into more contemporary artists, like Lisa Yuskevich, who paints these like candy shop women. They're just like beautiful and like full, and the color, like her greens are like an acid trip. They're just, there's so much intensity in them. But I think I was trying to like, I was beginning to delve into myself, but I was still on a really superficial level. I was still experiencing myself and my experience on a very physical level. So everything was related to my body and my relation to what was around me.
How would you say that you have evolved that conversation as time has gone on?
I think the conversation, it kind of spirals out from itself. So, depending on how you look at it, there's a perspective there, right? So that spiraling's occurring. And so you are having this conversation, but you can also see in relation, if you look to one side or the other layers of that conversation and the way it's changed and shifted, almost like a gradient. And then if you're really fully aware of it, you can almost even anticipate the other spirals as you get even farther out from that or deeper into that. So I think that, I started to delve in deeper. And so my work was very physical at first, and then it was very mental. I went to, we went to MICA, and there's so much theory, and then you're still also, I think, like completely so aware of everyone around you. At least that was my experience. But you're taking in so much more new information. So my work thought that it was going to get really heady and what's the word I'm looking for? Conceptual, I guess. I don't know. It did.
It's not right.
It's like, try it. Let's see what works. And it's very heady. And I think, actually, I don't think I realized this until right now. Thank you for prompting me in this direction. I think now I'm finally starting to experience my art in a spiritual way. It's been an emotional shift since college, and now I'm starting to experience it in this kind of spiritual way. And that, to me, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, there's 3 or 4 bodies depending on how you lump things together. Sometimes I think the emotional and the spiritual get lumped together, or the emotional and the mental, but there's division between them. All of those bodies relate to each other, and the patterns in one manifest in the patterns in others in different ways, and healing happens across the board. And I think that deep down, that's a huge part of what art is. It's at least a catalyst for healing to occur by starting conversations. So for me, I think, so maybe that's just part of my journey and exploration of life too. And because my art is so tied into it, becomes a part of it. But to really get clarity and wholeness, I think you have to really like dive into yourself and really acknowledge where your patterns are in all those bodies and on all those levels.
That's beautiful. I know for me, because we did go to the same school, although not the same time for the context of our audience here. I really admire the fact that you're someone who has kept their practice up years after graduating. 85% of people who graduate stop making art within 5 years of graduation.
Wow.
Yeah. After getting a BFA, 85% stop making art for the rest of their lives, actually.
Oh.
It's heartbreaking. Can you talk a little bit about, post-school life? Because a lot of my audience are people who are getting their MFA right now, or their BFA, and they're just about to, maybe they were going to graduate this May, but now they're not.
Yeah.
What that post-school slump is like, and what you did to overcome it, and how you've grown since then.
Yeah. Well, first of all, my heart goes out to, I mean, so many people, but this is one thing I was thinking about specifically the other day and talking to with a few other people that I graduated from Micah with, which was all of those seniors out there who were like prepping for this last semester of your senior year and your thesis and walking, and whether or not those things in themselves are important to you, not being allowed to have them, like my heart aches for those people. So for me, when I graduated from Micah, I moved back to the town that I went to high school in, and I moved around. I moved to New Cumberland, which is right outside of Harrisburg, where I live now. When I was 12, we moved back to the United States from New Zealand. I'm jumping back a little further here, but just for explanation's sake, where we had lived for 6 years.
We're born on a volcano.
Yeah, and I was born on a volcano, not in New Zealand, but in Hawaii. It's a whole other story. That's probably a whole other conversation. We can talk about, the body electronics and the semi-cult that I was born into some other time. But when I got out of Micah, I moved back to New Cumberland, which is where we moved when I was 12 years old. It's the town that I think I've lived in like 7 different houses in this town now. I was laughing about it the other day because I just recently, at the beginning of last year, it's been just a little over a year now, bought a house here. Thanks. It feels very adult. But I really love New Cumberland. My mom pointed out to me the other day that New Cumberland was settled by the exact demographic of my genealogical and cultural heritage and background. So like New Cumberland was settled by Scotch-Irish, Pennsylvania Dutch, German, English, and that's like all of my heritage. So she's like, there's something energetic there, if we're looking back on an ancestral level, there must be like an energetic spiritual familiarity. But I moved back here because it's where my family was, and I'm the oldest of now 6 kids, but 4 siblings 4 of us total, 3 that I grew up with. And I'm really close with my family. So part of the reason I moved back was because I wanted to be around them. And also I didn't have any money after college. So like moving in with my dad to live for free sounded like a really great deal at the time. I guess the other leaning thing there was the guy that I was dating lived around here and was going to law school around here. So kind of also worked out in that framework. So I got out of Micah, I moved home. One of my best friends stayed in Baltimore, and then shortly after that moved to DC. Another one went and lived on a farm with her boyfriend. And couple of my closest friends moved to New York City, which like, isn't that what we all really want to do? A lot of people want to do when they leave art school. I wanted it, but then every time I went to visit, I'm like, I don't think I want to live here. It's too stressful. There's too much going on. My sister went to school for a year in New York, and I went to visit her once, and I'm like, yeah. She was like, too much going on. Can't do it. But here I find myself in New Cumberland, out of art school, and suddenly all of the community I had built and the exchange of ideas and the people who think the way that I'm thinking are gone. And I'm in central Pennsylvania, which is generally very conservative. And I'm suddenly like this crazy out there oddball artist. Whereas in art school, sometimes I felt like a little too well adjusted. That might sound arrogant, but like maybe just like than a lot of people. Like it was almost like a little too close to normal that I was like an oddball in art school. And then it's the opposite experience coming back to New Cumberland. And everyone's like, oh, you're such a hipster. And I'm like, but I'm really not. Like
you and I are like, I feel like relatively normal people for art school.
Yeah. Like I'm like, I think I have like pretty good emotional intelligence. Like I can interact with people. Like, I mean, aside from also being an artist, I've worked in restaurants like my whole life. I've been a general manager of a restaurant and been a corporate trainer and like gone to different countries and trained new staff. And, like I'm good with people, which is not always the case with artists, I guess, right? Where artists are supposed to be like socially awkward and really bad at planning, and I don't know. It's when we get caught in those stereotypes that we're in trouble. But here I was trying to make art. I remember being really, really hard on myself like the first year after graduating MICA because I had one sketchbook and I didn't even finish it. And I was just like, what's wrong with you? Like, why aren't you making stuff? But I lost that all of that stimulation that was around me, constantly encouraging me to make. And when left to my own devices, I realized I didn't know where my framework was for creating at that point. I still had little projects going, but I wasn't making with the same ferocity, I guess, that I had been at MICA. And for a time, that really felt like a failure. I went through, like, I think the first 5 years after MICA, I was definitely making stuff, but not in the way that I was. And there was a part of me that thought I might lose it, thought, well, maybe I'm not an artist. Like, maybe I just wasted all that money to go to school. And I said I was working in a restaurant because no one wants to be a starving artist. My dad still loves that joke. And I started doing more with that. And in hindsight now, I look back at that and I realized that that was part of the process. I needed some time just in life living, because what do artists do but make work about what's going on around them? And if we're so disconnected from people, and I hate to say like everyday people, but I mean like people that aren't directly plugged into the art scene, how are we going to be relatable? And that really is one thing that I kept coming back to, is I don't like the inaccessibility of art. I think it's getting better, but art is still really elitist. It's still really like far more possible for a pretty privileged white girl from like the suburbs of a conservative state to get to go to art school, who has a family that can help her do that, than so many other people. And I mean, like, what I have my one little like caveat there that I'm female identifying, you know. So I have a little bit of a minority support on my side, but it's
Well, actually, most of the people who go to art school are female.
Oh, okay.
MICA is actually, when I was there, it was 70% female.
I did know that. I don't know. And I think too, I saw, now that you're saying that, I saw so many girls there where art was a way that they were working through a lot of stuff. Whether they were aware of it or not, it seemed very apparent to me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's accounts for some of why you have so many people not making art afterwards, is that it was serving a different purpose for them. Because I mean, that's part of the downfall in this situation too, is we're defining success in something like that as continuing to use it in a way that we already have a framework for. I found that, you know, a lot of my degree, so to speak, and the stuff, the tools, the information, the experience I gained through college was also really applicable to the stuff I was doing as a general manager of a restaurant, as a trainer for an organization, because it's problem solving. It's creative problem solving. It's being able to look at something and approach it from a different direction than a lot of the other people around you. Yeah.
And everything you're saying, there's so many points that I want to touch on and talk about. You know, I will say that with a lot of artists that I talk to, I think that it is not necessarily a unique outlook, but something that is worth admiring. The fact that you are concerned with speaking to people that aren't indoctrinated into the fine art world. You are interested in being relatable, which is not something that a lot of artists are. I'm not always interested in being relatable. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that is very grounding and very humbling in a very beautiful way. I also completely understand what you were saying about, you know, my girls from the suburbs. I feel like that's basically every girlfriend that I had in our college now.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a, I feel like I'm talking a little bit more than I have in the other interviews, but you know, I had the same experience with you because I went to the same college and I went back to the same town,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a shock for those who don't know. It's like going from a place where you can casually have a conversation about queer theory with literally anyone to a place with Amish morals.
Yeah.
The most sexually conservative place in the U.S. according to OkCupid.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's so
Yeah,
sad.
all the people banging their cousins in Alabama are more open than we are.
Well, they got all that French heritage. They're a lot more free than us.
I didn't know that.
Slightly more Pennsylvania Dutch, Luther. Yeah, no. Yeah.
You know, I I do admire the fact that you've been able to continue to create and explore a lot of the same themes because for all intents and purposes, I graduated 5 years ago, and I really haven't made sculpture since then, and I graduated with a degree in sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still making every single day. But
Mm-hmm.
when I talk about myself, I still define myself as a sculptor, not a photographer, even though I've taken 400,000 photos since then, not a writer, even though I've written a dozen books.
Yeah.
I call myself a sculptor. And it's, um, for me, and this is what I want to ask you, for me, when I came back, I felt like I had this quiet that I didn't have when I was at school, because everything is buzzing, everything is a conversation. But when I moved back, Trump was rising to power. I was working at a factory 80 hours a week. I was reading books on my lunch break.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me to figure out what it is that I actually wanted. And that's where I really came out as queer and all of that and changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
Did you experience something similar where you felt like this quiet, or like what did you change and what did you keep?
There was definitely a quiet there. And I kept kind of reaching out and searching and trying to find ways to reestablish a little bit of that. Because I think at that point in my life, I really wasn't very comfortable with quiet or silence. Again, I think part of that comes from being from a bigger family. Like I'm used to there always being stuff around. So I often find my quiet in the eye of all of that, in the eye of that storm, so to speak. A little bit of it, I think, did allow me to just like make unedited, because I wasn't comparing myself to anything else. But it also, I don't know, it kind of pushed me to really rethink the way that I wanted to be making. I mean, I was a general fine arts major, so I was kind of by design allowed a lot more fluidity in what I was making. And, like at the end of my time at MICA, I went in like, all two-dimensional drawing, painting, thinking maybe I'll be an art school, maybe I'll be an art teacher, to coming out doing like theater and performance art and writing poetry, which was really nice for me, I think. And that's, I have a really hard time defining myself in any particular way. Like you say, you're a sculptor. I guess I would call myself a poet, but more than anything, I just call myself a maker. For me, being an artist is not about the medium. It's about the message. It's about what's being, what I'm trying to say or channel or allow to come through me. And those messages find more truth and genuineness in different forms sometimes. I'm feeling like a weird connection there with like, my mind is trying to make a connection between like that and organized religion and mythology, and how we have like these, to me, that just like solidifies our interconnectedness. We have all of these different doctrines and texts telling us like all the same thing. Like they're basically saying the same thing when it comes down to it, but they're presented in different forms. And if you want to for a moment believe, or if you do believe, or you want to conceptualize the idea of believing in some kind of higher power or entity or universal consciousness or energy or something, it makes perfect sense that it would manifest in different ways to different people.
Yeah.
Because we don't all speak the same language, because we don't all have the same experiences, we aren't from the same places, and for us to experience that in a genuine and clear way, we need something that's relatable to us. I think maybe part of that for me is coming now from a place of, I think, starting to experience my art more on a spiritual or energetic level. A lot of my practice over the last year has involved a lot of meditation. I use that as a way to kind of create a space for myself to make and not be attached to my making, to kind of quiet that monkey mind, to put my perfectionist to bed for the time being, and just like open up and allow those messages to come through me.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit more about that, and I want to kind of draw a line here, but without putting words into your mouth.
Yeah.
So, in the area where you live right now, there's not a lot of art community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to get valuable feedback. But you can ask people, and people are kind, but it's not necessarily feedback that is going to help you grow in the way that you may need or will be most useful.
Mm-hmm. Compliment is like the quickest way to kill an idea sometimes.
Yeah, it's, and I think that's something, maybe as an observer of you, I see, because this is thing that I experience a little bit, is where you're like, if you're not, what are some tools that you're doing to have those conversations that you need to have? And would you consider like going inwards and meditating and having that conversation with yourself, as opposed to, having a studio visit? Would you consider that to be like a studio visit with yourself, or am I putting words into your mouth?
Certainly. Yeah, I think so. For me, so I have a really hard time as an artist. My block always comes, my block is, I know I'm the creator of my block as an artist. Like, I know that I get blocked when I start editing myself and critiquing myself before I've allowed myself to really explore an idea fully. Because I am really hard on myself, and very observant and insightful and reflective. And that's just my tendency in life. My family would tell you this about me as well, just as like a sister and a daughter and sister-in-law, etc. So what I really need to do is really focus and allow that, like, that mule, so to speak, of my creative side, let them rest and allow room for the muse and that more relaxed, unattached flow to happen, so that I can get that out, so I'm not constantly shutting the water off and blocking the flow. You never really fully realize the creative process. And meditation really, really helps. And even just breathing exercises. And when I say breathing exercise, I mean like just being conscious of your inhale and your exhale. It's not some big like production with like singing bowls and like flute and the wind and the ocean. I mean, it can be.
Yeah, it can, definitely. Now's the time to do that.
It doesn't have to be. And it's really about being able to access that like level of calm in your everyday. So like just closing your eyes and taking just 3 deep calming breaths, bringing yourself back into this like centered space. We say in yoga that the breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. And I think on that bridge is like, that's the sweet spot for creating, for me at least. Did I answer the question?
That's amazing. What about your practice right now is really exciting you?
Well, honestly, I feel like in the last 6 months, I've really tapped back into a playful quality in my making. I I guess it was in September, I left the restaurant that I've been working at for the last 8 years. And suddenly I have an extra 60 to 75 hours a week, 45 to 75 hours a week at my disposal to do things. And I had probably about 6 months before that, kind of broken down and gotten a tablet and started doing some digital drawing, because the space that I was working in didn't really allow for me to have a studio space to do any kind of painting or drawing on any scale. I like to be able to leave my stuff out. The whole setup and everything and taking down and everything really, again, it inhibits that flow for me. I need that space to just be easy and available. So being able to work digitally really allowed me to be able to just start making again. And again, I was still working a job that was pretty physically and emotionally draining. So I didn't really have a whole lot of energy to give to what I really wanted to be doing. And I finally feel like I've kind of opened that back up at this point. It took me a while to get myself back into the flow. One of the really great things I think about working digitally is it allows me to be really unprecious with what I'm making. Because there's also this other side of me this thing that's always kind of like talking in my ear, that's like talking about waste and like, and I don't ever want not that like, for me, if I make something and I learn something from it, then it has value. But if I'm doing that on canvas or on paper, I am also producing something that might not necessarily ever find a home other than a fire pit, or, I don't want to be adding waste to the world. So, I do understand that there's like a carbon offset. I am using something that takes power to be charged and everything. It's always in my head, all of the little back and forth of all of this. But for me, it's allowed me to be really, really unprecious, which has allowed me to just like discover some things that I might not have discovered otherwise. And I've found like this whole new layer of series that I realize I've been working on for like 10 years. Like a lot of the imagery and the stuff that's coming up in these digital drawings and paintings and watercolors that I'm doing is like reminiscent of stuff I was doing right before we started working on my poetry book. All the mindscapes and these like ethereal turning in, they're like landscapes of my insides kind of, but my insides aren't necessarily my body. They might be like on this other astral plane, we'll say. I think, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you access that creative part of you and how you translate that ethereal plane to a 2D medium.
So I will, if I started drawing after a meditation, I usually have either colors or images that kind of come to me during that meditation. So I draw from something within that meditation usually, and I use that as a starting point, whether it's a color or a shape or emotion or emotion, because they can sometimes take physical forms. And I usually do it right after, like I try to do it right in my space where I've been meditating. So it just like almost becomes an extension of that. I get a little lost. I try to get lost in it, honestly, and wander, making discoveries as I go, I suppose. And I feel like often I don't fully realize what I'm making until I've already made it. Usually until like I come back to it the next day and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, okay. So this was this part, like it reminds me of something else I touched on in the meditation, or I make a connection to a conversation I had the day before. So I guess it's kind of a pouring out of my unconscious in a way.
Do you have a ritual around this? Like, do you have like a start thing that you do and an end ritual?
For the drawing, I guess breathing is part of it, for sure. I always start with a couple deep breaths, but then I also, once I start to feel myself getting distracted, or I usually try to not, I usually try to give myself kind of little breakups and things when I'm making, especially when you're, making on the exact same size over and over again. It is good to just set it down and step away from it. It's just like standing while you're painting and being able to get those different experiences of things. So I think I still apply a lot of the tools and things that I learned, in school.
Yeah.
And not just at Micah, that's stuff that you're learning from. I learned from some of my high school art teachers as well. I really try to, like, I'm someone that really tries to draw from other mediums than the one that I'm working in. So often if I'm writing a lot of poetry, I'm not reading a lot of poetry. I'm reading like spiritual self-help books and yoga texts, and I really love science fiction and fantasy. That's like my 90% of my reading catalog. Or I listen to music or listen to audiobooks. But then I'll find too, if I'm painting a lot, then I'm not tending to intake as much visual work by artists. It's more, I try to look to things in my everyday. I think you still end up, because at least for me, I pull a lot from my unconscious. I think it's still a lot of stuff unintentionally gets pulled through and dredged up and things, everything crosses over, but I try not to just be a poet inspired by poets, or a painter inspired by painters, I guess, is what I want to say.
So this is a bit of a selfish question, but I think that you're so smart in trying to do, when you create, you just create. You're not editing at the same time. And when I consult with artists and all of that, and that's the advice that I give every artist whenever they're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing that you got it. I want to ask you, while you're in that create mode,
mm-hmm.
is failure a possibility? And if so, what constitutes a failure for you?
Yeah, failure's always, sorry, that's my reminder telling me to breathe. Failure's always a possibility, but I think when you're really balanced in that mode, failure's also a success, because it's a lesson, because a failure also acknowledges something you don't like, therefore you know something that you do like and you want to try. But I guess the other side of that is too, then maybe there really isn't any failure. It's really just how we choose to look at things. It's really just all about perspective. Like, there's this really, really fantastic book. It's like, I'm surprised this is the first book I've referenced in this talk. This is not like me. My very favorite book, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, my favorite section of it is called On Joy and Sorrow. And it talks about how one doesn't exist without the other, and our experience of one expands our capacity to experience the other more fully. And I think success and failure is a very similar thing. It's like, how do we know one without the other?
That's beautiful.
Actually, I'm going to talk about failure. There's a really great commencement speech by J.R.R. Tolkien she gave at Harvard back in, I want to say like 2011, 12, I don't know. If you look up J.R.R. Tolkien commencement speech, you'll be able to at least find a written form of it, if not her actually saying it. But the speech is all on the importance of failure. So.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was your favorite book. Tell me what makes that your favorite. I haven't read it since high school.
there's definitely a sentimental element of it to me. My father gave me my first copy of it, and it's after he graduated from college, he backpacked around the United States, and that was the only book he brought with him. I, looking back on it, acknowledge that it has a lot of the boxes checked for things that I like in books. Poetic authors who illustrate their own work, slightly prophetic like texts. I mean, the title is The Prophet. But it's written in a really beautiful way, and it's one of those books where I'm never going to stop reading it. It's just like my practice. It's like every time I read it, I get something different from it, and I'll pick it up and I'll open it to a page, and it'll be the right page for that day somehow. Like somehow it'll resonate and be able to help me move throughout my day with a little more grace and ease. I think it's also a really beautiful text that is about human nature and is spiritual without being preachy or religious within the context of a doctrine. So I feel like it's something that to me feels really accessible to anyone. And I think to jump back to that, because that was something we were talking about earlier, and I wanted to say something there. For me, it's not always that I want my art to be accessible to everyone, but rather that I want people to feel like art is accessible to them. I want to demystify it for people, because I think most people that aren't in any way really involved in the art community feel like they're not allowed to talk about it because they're not a part of the community, because they don't have an education. And to me, art is one of the most human things. You shouldn't have to have an education to be able to experience something. Yes, your and my experience of art is probably better informed than, my 20-year-old brother, but that doesn't mean that we can't each have our own unique experience of it, and it still gains something from that experience.
What advice would you have? And this is another selfish question here. So I'm struggling to read right now.
Mm-hmm.
Finding a lot, even though I'm stuck at home with all the quiet time in the world, I'm having trouble sitting still to read the stuff that actually really inspires me in my practice. Do you have any advice for that?
Where do you read? Do you have a space?
I don't have a space to do anything.
that you feel safe in? Do you have a physical, comfortable space to sit down and read and put your attention into that book?
I've been sitting on my floor in my room.
Okay.
I have a little blanket that I roll up.
Okay.
But it's been not good. I try and read one chapter in a book, but for me, I read very, very quickly. So one chapter is about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I haven't done it in 3 days even.
Hmm. I find that I go through phases with anything. For me, any routine I ever set for myself is going to have fluctuations and variations. So one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give anyone is be gentle with yourself. It's okay. Maybe you're not supposed to be reading a lot right now. Maybe you're supposed to be turning inward and taking a book off of the shelf in your own mind and paging through that. It'll come back to you if you want to read. But as far as giving yourself a little bit of an extra nudge in that direction, create a space that feels comfortable and safe for you to do that. Because putting your attention into a book is something that when we're in a very fight or flight space, which I think all of us are right now, most people are not used to spending this much time in their houses. I've been in my house this much for like the last 6 months. So like for me, it's like, oh, everyone's just doing what I'm doing now. But when you're in that mode and you're like, it's, you're having to do with your nervous systems and everything, fight or flight versus like rest and relax, taking a little bit of time to breathe. I know I keep coming back to this, like it's this golden chalice of solving everything, but it kind of is. slowing your breath down and balancing your inhales and your exhales and signaling your body to come into that rest and relaxed state will probably allow you a little bit more space to feel that comfort and be able to rest into that. Because when you're in your fight and your fight and flight and your monkey minds, like there's too much going on up here, and your body is like actually like in a state of tense, like something is going to try to kill me. Of course you can't focus on a book. Like that's not going to save your life if there's a rabid tiger outside of your door. Like you need to be aware. So giving our body, the space to rest so that our mind can calm itself would be really helpful, probably.
That's super smart. Thank you. And I'm going to follow up that with another selfish question.
Okay.
Because I know that you are a, trained yogi, professional yogi. Is that true?
Yeah, certified yoga teacher.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing. And so I'm going to pick your brain for some free advice here.
Okay.
So I am struggling I'm someone who had a pretty healthy exercise routine in my life.
Yeah.
But now I have to do everything in my room.
Mm-hmm.
I have to work out. And like for me, I don't even own a bed. I literally just have to, I sleep on a rug, and I have to roll up my rug and then work out first thing in the morning, like right after, in the same space that I sleep in.
Yeah.
And for me, like my bedroom is supposed to be like a sacred place where I don't work and I don't work out, and it's for sleeping and dreaming and all of that. And I'm really struggling mixing these spaces. Do you have any advice for someone like me? Because I imagine this is happening to a lot of other artists. This is why I'm selfishly asking. I live in a one bed. Like everything has to happen all in the same space. It's causing me a lot of trauma.
I understand how that could be very triggering. I would say that taking a few moments then in between those transitions, so that space, think of that space like this rotating Rubik's Cube of utilitarian sanctuaries, we'll call them, because that word feels very, very pleasing. As you roll that sleeping rug up and you set aside your bed, that's a meditation in itself. Take a moment to be really present with the process of rolling that away and create a vision. I mean, we're artists, we can visualize things, right? Visualize for yourself that space like shifting and transitioning into this new space that is now for you to work out in. Like the image that's coming into my head is Max in Where the Wild Things Are, as his like bedroom disappears and the trees grow up, and now all of a sudden he's in this forest, and now he's on a boat in the water. Create that for yourself. Like allow your imagination to ease, the utilitarian purposes that we have to use our spaces for, because bottom line is, I mean, most of my life, my bedroom has also been my workspace and my workout space. I'm lucky to have a unfinished attic that I use as a studio now. But that's still a very new thing for me too. Really setting, I think, intentions for the space, and like having a moment in between those transitions to kind of like close the door, so to speak, on the previous space might be helpful.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what you're excited about moving forward with your practice.
It's funny because I was just, as all of this stuff, started beginning of March, end of February, as COVID-19 really started to become into the American mindset, so to speak. We became finally aware of it, and everything, again, I live in a really conservative area, so we were taking precautions 3 weeks ago. Our governor was like already suggesting social distancing and encouraging that. And so the federal mandated stuff's kind of for us coming about 2 weeks after. Most people I know were already kind of doing that. But for me, that happened like the weekend before those decisions were made, at least within like my households and the ones that I frequent. I graduated from yoga teacher training. I had this like completed this great huge journey into myself and had like built this tribe of people, and it was all these people that I was starting to connect with, and I had like was going to start teaching, and I had some like an artist group set up with another artist in the area where we were going to start meeting, and then all of a sudden it was just like, nope, can't do any of that. So I'm forgetting the question you asked now. I was going somewhere with that. Can you remind me? Maybe I'll find my way back to my train.
So it's looking forward in your practice.
Yes. Okay.
What are you excited about?
Connecting with people and actually getting my work out there. I'm just starting to find ways to bring these drawings that were first in my mind and are now on my tablet into the physical world in a way with a lot of intention. I'm just kind of really excited to see the way that that explores and unfolds. And now that I feel like I'm in a much more whole and saturated place with myself as a person and an artist, I think I finally feel ready to connect with artists in other ways. I don't think like I don't really feel like I've felt like that for years. I think that's been a big thing for me in the last 10 years. So since Micah, basically, is really deciding what I want to say. I'm ready to say it. Like letting go of that fear. I think that's a big part of it is, I keep writing, like I will not be coerced by fear. I will not be defined by my traumas. I'm ready to start writing a new story.
Yeah. I'm going to keep asking you selfish questions because I really respect your answers, and I don't get to talk to a lot of people who I can ask these questions to, quite honestly. So for me, I'm making a lot of art. I'm making art all the time. I consider this to be part of my art practice very much.
Absolutely.
But it's very much direction driven, where it's like, I'm doing it in ways that I think will grow my businesses or connect or, really kind of advance myself in the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try and incorporate things that I'm really passionate into them and amalgamate that and make it work. But I really can't remember the last time that I did something where like I just made it just for me with no intentions of sharing with anyone else, or like taking the time to like really invest myself in a project that is just going to be like very overwhelming, like a lot, with no real benefit other than myself.
I think in a lot of ways that's what I was doing with a lot of these drawings, which I think I haven't shared the folder with you, but I'll send that over to you now. But a lot of the stuff that I've been posting, initially for me, I was just making it for myself. And then people I know saw it and they were like, this is really cool. Other people like this too. And I'm like, I don't really think other people like this too. I think you're just being nice because you love me. But that's like, I think that's one of the toughest parts about being an artist in the world who is also trying to sustainably live off of that, right? Live off of those, maybe not necessarily your physical art, but your creative practices and your processes. I feel like as artists, we're a brand in ourselves, and that's, there's like a lot of layers to that. I feel like, especially in the time period that we live in now with social media and so much interconnectedness and everything. I don't know, but I think it is really important to have stuff that you're making just for yourself, for the sake of those other things as well. Like, that's how you keep things fresh. That's how you stop things from getting stale. So I would say start with something small, something that seems really like easy and obtainable, and build from there. Like, I just started with little doodles because I was like, well, I can spare 15 minutes to do something. And
Yes.
then maybe the next day I respond to what I did that 15 minutes before. And if you're anything like me, you'll probably hate all of that for a while and be like, this is trash and this isn't what I wanted to be doing anyway. But there'll be a moment eventually that'll click if you are persistent with it, that you'll be like, oh, okay, I am on the right track. That did lead me somewhere.
That's exactly the advice that I needed to hear.
Okay, good.
You know, I was saying of breaking my routine because I can't. I've tried 5 different morning routines right now since being isolated. Can't seem to get one to stick.
Yeah.
Like last night, I decided that I really want to make a very long YouTube video essay about how I think that the Matrix sequels are like the greatest piece of trans cinema ever made, and how all of the like straight white guys on the internet who talk about it don't actually get the fact that it's about coming out as trans. And why? But it's just like for me, that's like such an overwhelming task,
Yeah.
like to unpack. And I think that you're right. Starting with something, and it won't help me in any way. Like it's going to take a ton of time, and it will provide no value other than the fact that I just have this thing that I really want to say. Uh,
But that's the best art, is like when you're like, I don't know if anyone wants to hear this, but I really want to say this. So here's my empty ballroom and I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, or street corner or closet. Well, let's face it, closet or kitchen or
yeah,
under the dining room table. Those are pretty much our options right now.
yeah. It's so nice. I mean, I've had. I think you're right. So far this week, you're my 5th person that I've interviewed, and you're the first person where I felt like vulnerable enough to talk about my practice. Really. um,
I have that effect on people.
um, I want to just talk about. I want to go back because you did have that restaurant job for 8 years, and there were a lot of people who are working away at their day job and trying to make art and trying to balance it all. And I know that you really kind of exploded with this creativity and freedom since you quit. But now, what advice can you give to someone who's working through that?
So for me, I I was initially I was just I was just a server and a bartender. It was just like I was only doing that to support my freelance work as an artist, which wasn't supporting me at all. Let's be honest. There's this idea that it was like supplemental. No, that's what's supporting me so that I can make my art. And I'm someone who I'm not really capable of doing something like 50%. Like if I'm going to do something, it's 110%. Like if you're not going to try to be good at something, then why do it? Like I realize that's kind of contradictory to the advice I just gave you previously, but I'm a work in progress as well. And we teach that best, which we need to learn ourselves.
That's our paradox.
But for me, so then right around I'm like I said, I'm pretty good at things I choose to do because I choose to do them. And I excelled at my job, and I wasn't just a bartender then. I was like, I got hired by our corporate uh, office to be a trainer, and I got to go some really cool places because of it. A lot of it was timing. Like I just got in at the right time, but I went to Jakarta, Indonesia. I went to Dubai. I went to Doha. I went to Mobile, Alabama, El Paso, Texas, Red Bank, New Jersey. Very exotic places. Anyway, a lot of different places with a lot of different people and perspectives, and that in itself was so good for my art, was being able to be different places and interact with different people. But I still wasn't making the way that I wanted to, and I got the opportunity to be a manager. Kind of got duped into being a general manager. They offered me an assistant manager job, and then like 3 weeks into my training, they were like, just kidding, you're actually going to be the general manager, which was a lot more than I thought I was going to be taking on. Because initially when I took that on, I was like, oh, I'm just an assistant manager. I'll still be able to make my art. But I really quickly realized that like to do that job and to try to still support my art practice, there just wasn't enough of me emotionally and physically and energetically to give to both what they deserved. There's a lot of responsibility as a general manager. One of the biggest parts of it that I didn't realize was part of the job is how much of a emotional support you are for everyone on your team, and then also all of the guests and all of the vendors and everyone. And so it ended up just being something that took too much of me for me to have enough to sustain that. And then there was nothing left for my art. I'm not saying that that you can't do that and be creative. I just wasn't able to in the way that I was doing it. There are other factors in that, which were a lot of the relationships I was in and the habits I had didn't support me even being able to pursue that type of thing. I kind of like had myself wondering the other day if where I am now with the mindset I have and a lot of the way that I've integrated yoga in my life, if I'd be able to do both now. And I realized that like for me, that job falling away was part of the thing, one of the things that I had to let go of that wasn't serving me anymore, because it was time for me to really shift my intentions and my practice and really start to focus on my art, because I took that time in that position and doing those jobs because it was part of my practice. I realize I wasn't making art, but I was filling the trout pond, so to speak. I was building up my understanding and my emotional intelligence and my scope of human experience, which allows me to approach my art in a fuller and wholer way. If that makes sense.
Completely.
And I would say that for anyone who might be trying to make that transition out of working a day job that supports your practice, the first thing I would say is be gentle with yourself. Give yourself time to readjust and recalibrate to a new lifestyle. You know, there's a lot of things that go into that, and I don't think we show ourselves enough patience sometimes.
Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, very briefly, can you say that, let's say that you know that this is being at that kind of corporate job for the foreseeable future, say the next 6 months or a year, maybe you will make that transition, which I want to ask you about next. But let's say that you know that you need this, you have a mortgage or something, kids.
Yeah.
Just what advice do you do, like, to make do? Should you be concerned with producing, or should you just focus on surviving and observation? Or
I don't think you should ever be concerned with producing as an artist. I think when we get too caught up in just the sheer fact of production and how much we're making, we lose. It's like we lose one of the colors in the printer. It just, everything's thrown off. But if that is part of the lifestyle that you're in right now and what needs to be continued, I'd say set an achievable goal or standard for yourself to keep that spark alive. It's not about producing, it's just about continuing to still support that creative spark, and that, mine's like guarded by my inner child. My inner child is like, no, we need this. This play is important. So finding a way to just do small creative things in your life, in your daily life, that feed that feed that fire and keep it burning, though maybe it has to be smaller right now, it's still there for when we can return to it. So I mean, like, I'm trying to think what I had a lot of silly little creative outlets in the job that I worked. We were like very much a company that was based on experience, making moments into memories and the perfect night out and these elaborate like celebrations and like making people feel really special. And there's something really creative in that can be applied in that. So I found ways to apply my creative process to that. I mean, in very physical ways, like making ridiculously elaborate like birthday plates and anniversary plates for people. Like I once like completely constructed SpongeBob and Squidward out of Rice Krispie treats and dyed white chocolate like 10 different colors so that I could dip them in and make these things for this really sweet little girl from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I found an outlet. I found something that was like, that's not my art, but I was able to be creative, and that creative object brought joy to someone else. And that to me is production that is useful and useful outwardly because it's putting something beautiful out into the world and causing someone to have a joyful experience, but it's also keeping that fire stoked in yourself, doing something creative when you can't make what you really want to be making, I guess.
It's so interesting that I was kind of getting triggered from my last job when you were talking about like company vision and experience, like what does it create? You're not just, when you're working at a restaurant, you're not just creating food, you're creating an experience for the guests.
Mm-hmm. Well, the restaurant industry is like, my brother and I had, my brother briefly, one of my brothers, well actually both of my brothers, but it was my brother AJ and I had this realization a couple of years ago when he was briefly working there, saving up some money for his wedding at the time. And with this realization, we're like, oh my God, the restaurant industry is just like everyone's desire to be royalty. Like it's just everyone's desire to have a servant for like even like a half an hour, like a couple hours. Like it like, think about it though. Everyone loves to boss someone, and have someone at your beck and call, and you see it. If you have ever worked in the service industry, you have a better perspective on humanity and human experience than anyone else. And I say that in a good and bad way. Just like coming back to joy and sorrow, there are extremes in both ends. And there's a lot more in the middle, but we always focus on those extremes, right? It's always like the terrible tippers who are just like treated you like crap all night. And then there's like really sweet people that like remember your family and ask you questions when they come in to visit, and they always tip you really well,
Hopefully the viewers are the second group.
I think so. That's what I think.
I think so I've never worked in restaurants, but my last job I was working front desk at a 5-star hotel.
Same thing.
And I know for me, I grew up relatively poor, and no one had ever treated me the way that I was expected to treat people. And it was quite a shock for me to learn how to treat people this way.
Mm-hmm.
But, like when someone asks something, I don't say, okay, I'll get it for you. I say, my pleasure. It's my, I live to serve you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
It's actually kind of like vomit inducing. But when I went and started my own business now, a service business, I know how to treat people and how to do that. And so like those skills that I learned there are some stuff that I've now taken into my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you are selling work, you write a thank you card.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk to you now because you have made that transition.
Mm-hmm.
Just as I think now a lot of artists are forcibly made that transition to home alone. You have all this free time. How do you navigate that? All right, fine. After 8 years, you finally got the freedom. You can do whatever you want. How do you get your ass up at 6 a.m. and do it?
Yoga. Yoga is what gets me out of bed in the morning. Because I'm like one of those people that like, if I had it my way, I'd take like 3 hours to wake up in the morning. Like I like to like roll around, read my book, have someone bring me coffee. There's always someone bringing me coffee in that, beautiful realm of leisurely waking up. And I still like, even after that 3 hour leisurely wake up, wearing my like velour robe with the fluff and the little slippers and everything. It's still like 7 o'clock in the morning and I still have all day ahead of me. The reality of that is if you take that much time to wake up in the morning, it's probably like noon or 2 o'clock by the time you roll out of bed, and most people's days have already started. Um, you set a routine for yourself. It's something I've been talking with my sister a lot about. She lives out in LA and she's completely isolated, completely on her own in like a 1-bedroom apartment. And it's really easy to kind of just, as we are right now, slip into this tendencies of just not doing anything. So like I have like a list for myself of things that bring me joy that I want to have in my everyday. And having that list and kind of seeing the physical vision of it and being able to then like attach that to like how much time it actually takes for me to integrate those into my day motivates me to do that, because I know that when I get up and do yoga in the morning, my whole day is better. I feel better. I'm ready to create. I'm ready to make myself something to eat, and make that a meditation in itself too, taking time to really be present with the food that I'm preparing and think about where it came from. You have to create a practice for yourself. And the practice isn't just your art, it's your life. It's what you allow to be there, and it's what you allow and to fill up your time, and what you allow to fall away because it's not serving or supporting that practice.
I'm going to steal that list idea. How long do you work out? Because I'm trying to work out before I eat now, and I just have like no energy.
So my workout routine has been adjusted because I started this list thing with my sister, and I managed to loop myself into leading her through yoga every day, which for her is her morning at 9 o'clock, but that's really like noon for me. So I have this weird, like, I used to get up and do yoga in the morning, and now I'm transitioning to doing it later in my day. But I do get to sit and read that book in the morning now. Which if, again, coming back to your question about reading, maybe try that being like one of the first things when you do when you wake up is sitting and reading. It's like a nice way to wake up. I always find that I end up, especially if I read, right, like that being one of the first things I do when I wake up, it's that kind of carries throughout my day, and it informs a lot of my thought patterns and, where my day leads me. We usually work out we'll usually do like a flow that lasts. I usually fall into a practice of doing like an hour and 15-minute flows, maybe an hour and a half. If I'm just like not paying attention to the time or anything, but I've been trying to kind of keep them between like 45 minutes to an hour and 15. Granted, that workout also involves like a shavasana and a meditation. So it's not just working out. So I'm probably working out for like half hour, 45 minutes.
That's awesome.
So something to just like get your body moving, especially when we can't get out of our houses, like owe it to ourselves to keep everything loose, because we are feeling very confined in these spaces.
Yeah. Oh, we laugh because it's sad.
Yeah. But it's good to find humor.
So, you made that difficult transition, and it's amazing. You got out of the restaurant industry at the perfect time.
Yeah, you're telling me.
But you made that transition from working the life that you felt that you needed to designing the life that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that transition? Some of the fears, some of the things that you wish that you had known, and then maybe some advice to people who are stuck at home now and maybe want to stay at home?
Mm-hmm. I almost like bailed on myself probably like 3 times. I left the location that I had been working at with the opportunity to go and work for the corporate office at a company store. And I almost took it. Like I almost went because I got scared that I wasn't going to be able to support myself as an artist, that I was just not good enough and I was kidding myself. But that's just my fear talking. That's just my insecurity. That's just my perfectionistic nature. That's just my limiting belief patterns. And that's like, when I realized that, that's really when I started to have a turnaround. Now, like, this is not all completely sustainable for me right now. I am still totally figuring this out. I was able to get a lot of things financially in place before this happened. So I have a really low cost of living right now. So I'm able to make do on not a lot. If I were in any other situation, I probably would still have to do some kind of part-time work that wasn't specifically related to my art. But I'm doing other little things to supplement that as I build in more sustainable stuff with my art. Like I watch my godkids a couple times a week, and their parents have a stipend through their work to pay people to watch their children. So they pay me a little bit to do it. Stuff I would be doing anyway, but I'm reaching out to my community of people to help me find a way to build this life the way I want to go. I want to get back to limiting beliefs. Really identifying those limiting beliefs and finding ways to trace them back to the trauma or the incident or the experience that formed them, and acknowledging them, and then really trying to rewrite them. And that's like not a one-time thing. It's really like it's really a building. One of my really big ones is I have to work harder than anyone else to succeed. Do you know how much that just taints and poisons any success I've ever had in my entire life? Because even if I have a little taste of success, I'm like wearing those laurels. It's still like, yeah, but you didn't work as hard as you could. So this isn't really success. Like, this could have been so much better, but you slacked. And it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's a pattern I see in my mother, in my grandmother. So it's not just my pattern either. It's ancestral. It's deep rooted in my lineage. But by acknowledging that maybe I don't have to work so hard to be successful. Maybe I need to really look at the way that I'm defining success. And one of the ways that I'm finding that is in my daily life. I'm trying to find my success in just a day well lived. Was I able to experience today with more grace and ease than I did yesterday? Was I able to encounter the challenges and the things presented in front of me with a little bit less attachment, with a little bit more love and compassion and understanding for myself and for those around me? And I think generally I'm like on the upward trajectory with that. Like, generally today's a little bit better than the previous day, or at least as whole and beautiful and unique in itself. If you are, I mean, it's so hard to like say like, this is what you should do, or this is what you should do. But if you are trying to find a way to sustainably live off of your art, I think you do have to realize that that's a part of your daily life. And then you also do have to find ways to be getting it out there and making connections, whether it's if you're trying to start a business or if you're trying to build the brand of what your art is. Obviously, you are a fantastic resource for anyone who is trying to embark on that. As someone who I think has always been doing this the entire time I've known you have. I was talking with my mom just before this, and I was like, oh yeah, because I was doing yoga with her and my sister, and I was like, I have a Zoom call with Mike a little bit, talking about another business that he's starting, but that's one of the things I love about you, is I think that you do things really fearlessly, or not fearlessly. I hate that, because fear still exists. You have to be courageous while holding hands with your fear.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm personally, I'm afraid of everything. But fear is not a reason not to do it.
Exactly. And you should never be motivated by that fear. Like, that fear should never be the driving force behind why you do something.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been very frustrating because I left my job, my stable job, last week in February to start a service business. Mm-hmm. It's just been like, whew!
Yep.
So it's been such a wild ride. figuring that out. And I guess something that I want to add, just for our viewers, not to, you know, to build on what you were saying, is for me, I really connected with my mission.
Mm-hmm.
And my mission with Premier Art Documentation is to share diverse thoughts and ideas, particularly with the arts. And I realized that even though I can't necessarily be out there photographing, which is what the service business is, I can still do that through Zoom calls. And I'm not making money from this. It's continuing the mission.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think, yeah, that's it right there, is defining what that mission is. And a really great way to kind of like hone in on that for yourself, for anyone who's, I guess, wondering, how do I figure out what my mission is? One of the things that I did initially was I made a list of people I admire and why I admire them. And I discovered two things. One, that a lot of these things that I admired in these people, other people would say they admire about me. But like, I know this, I'm not just being arrogant. I know this because I had a conversation with my mom and she's like, well, you're that way. Okay, yeah, fine. It's always fun when your mother's right. But also where those people are in relation to you in your life. I think it's really important to, I know we can't like physically surround ourselves with those people, but the people we choose to have Zoom conversations with, the people we choose to connect with in this state where we are having to turn more inward, those are the people that we're going to model ourselves after. You want to surround yourself with people that expand you, that encourage you to grow and push yourself beyond your boundaries, because ultimately we become whatever we surround ourselves with. And that was a big part of what was so hard for me in the service industry. Was there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of addiction, there's a lot of unconsciousness. And when you're constantly surrounded by that, you can't help but start to integrate that into your daily experience. Or at least I wasn't really able to. I needed to just like separate myself. Was I going? There's something else there I wanted to say. It's really important. Or not really important, it just felt related to that. I don't know, it'll come back to me. If it's
I have a tactical question for you.
Yeah.
So you published a book with me. We doubt the call even as we answer it. Check it out on Amazon. If you're stuck at home, it's the book to read. It's amazing. Every time I have book fairs, it's like the one that sells most, and it's got a lot of feedback on. And we published that several years ago, 2-3 years now.
Yeah, I guess 3. Was it? Yeah, 2017.
Yeah. So I own a publishing company. I don't know if I haven't mentioned that so far in these interviews, although it's the publishing company that the YouTube page is on. But your book sells every month. You have a book selling, and that's, with a lot of other artists, they'll sell a whole bunch in the beginning and then they'll never sell again. And this is a multi-part question here. So, but one, your book is always selling, which is amazing and inspiring and like, wow. So I want to ask, like, how are you doing that? And two, I think that you're really good at spreading your art and sharing your message and connecting with that, but never in an overbearing way. And you're not, like, you're posting on Instagram all the time, but you don't have the hugest following, but the people that do follow you are really passionate about you. And everyone who I've ever talked to has such an extremely high opinion of your art and you. And that's not true for everyone. It's like, everyone I say, like, oh, I have a conversation with Megan, I say, oh, I love her art. Like, that's always the first thing that comes out. How do you do that? People don't have that reaction to my art, I don't think. Like,
your art is a little intellectual for some people, Mike, I think. I don't know. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. Not that I think it is innately. I just think that sometimes it's harder for them to approach. I think, I don't know, maybe my work is approachable. I tend to be very like, I'm not really, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm very good at like taking compliments and things, but I feel like when I talk to people about my work, um, as we said before, I try to be really inclusive. Like I don't ever try to make people feel right or wrong about what they experience with my work. I'm genuinely interested. I see their interaction with it as an extension of the art itself, which I feel like is a principle you're familiar with, and like I've seen you integrate in things that you've done. Um, I I'm very conscious on social medias of not constantly selling myself, because I don't want to ever feel like that's why I'm making. It's because I need to sell. I get excited about what I'm doing, so I want to share it with people, and maybe that translates digitally because I think I don't even really very often. I will sometimes write about my work, but like often I'll just like post pictures on my story and I don't even like tag that it's me. I mean, I guess most of the time it's obvious it's me because I have um, a pretty recognizable line work aesthetic. I think people love pictures, and that's the one thing I would say about my book of poetry is that there's drawings on like every single page. So I think I think in a way that maybe that in itself is part of the reason that people are drawn to my book because like, I mean, there's whole poems that are just drawings. There's no like right way to read that, right? There's no language for those lines except for what I've created. So it's like everyone's reading it in a foreign language, if that, I guess, or an unfamiliar language, if that makes sense. I mean, maybe artists feel a little bit more adapt to reading a haiku that's three little clusters of undulating lines, but I don't know.
So I'm gonna, let's play an exercise here. I am now a 15-year-old boy with a Monster Energy drink. Hi, Megan. Can you tell me about your art?
Sure.
What do you do?
That Monster Energy drink has like an entire sack of sugar in it would probably be the first thing I would say to a 15-year-old boy. This is my whole demographic. This is like all the people I worked with at the restaurant. I'm like very used to interacting with teenage boys. I generally just really like to make teenage boys feel uncomfortable. Probably because teenage boys made me feel so uncomfortable, if I'm being honest, okay? Like it's a power play.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, I'm sure I would get something, I would show them some of my work and be like, yeah, no, this is something I was working on the other day. Like I was thinking a lot about ahimsa, which is like nonviolence and being nonviolent with ourselves and how that's a direct relation to how we interact with the world, to which I'd probably get a blank stare. Be like, what do you like about it? Be like, oh, I like the colors in their lines. They're pretty trippy, I bet your art would be really awesome if I was on acid. Yeah, my art probably would be really awesome if you were on acid. Probably even better if you were on mushrooms. You'd probably be like, touching it and stuff.
I'll commission a wall-sized piece or an installation, and then drop mushrooms together.
Oh, that'd be so good. And then it'll dry, and like you'll be able to feel.
What if we drop mushrooms and then like paint the room all on mushrooms, and then you really connect with the universe?
You'd be like building the universe out from yourself in that space. Like that room would become the Big Bang, would become that like stardust that created the universe. And in itself is an extension because all that matter still already exists.
I realized that I wanted to be an installation artist when I was on acid.
Really?
Yeah. So I was in a house and it was raining.
Yeah.
And thinking about how the house is made of wood, and the wood, when it rains, it saturates and it expands, and then when it dries, it contracts. And I was like, the room I'm in is breathing right now.
Oh yeah.
I'm breathing, and it's breathing, and I'm inside of it. And thought about that for the next 8 hours.
Yeah, as Yeah, there's usually one lingering thought throughout it all, right?
Yeah.
Um, no, no, I think there is also, I mean, I do spend more time than I would like to on social medias. I have my little reminder that tells me how long, you've been on this for 45 minutes, Megan, and then I'm still on it for another 45. And we all have our screen time things. We can actually go and look and see how long we stay on apps. That's one thing that's scary to me. I just prefer not to know. But I'm very curious about the way that people present themselves. I think social media is just so fascinating because everyone now has this way to create a persona. It's kind of tricking everyone into being an artist in a way, because as much as you want to say, oh yeah, I'm just being genuine, that's what it is, it's choreographed. Everything we put into these places, whether it's conscious or not, we're adding to a portrait of ourselves, this extended portrait. And being someone that didn't really have, being just old enough that I didn't really have social media through, definitely not through middle school. You had the beginnings, MySpace and Zanga and things like that. And then, but when I got on Facebook, I remember I couldn't get a Facebook until I had a college email address. You couldn't sign up for Facebook until you had a college email address. My sister got a Facebook when she was 12 years old. College wasn't even on the horizon yet. And how these longer, extended, prolonged experiences with social medias is evolving. I don't want to say corrupting. It's evolution. It's changing, but it's changing the way that we interact with each other. But it's also, I think it's opening up a lot of possibility for creativity and connection. I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but
Yeah,
I find it a really cool. I find it really fascinating to just observe that. It's rich, the pageantry.
I'm someone who's basically exclusively making for social media right now. I'm at the point where I have enough Instagrams that I need 2 phones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to make 100 YouTube videos in 10 days, which I only got about 40 and felt like a failure. But one of the things that's been really interesting and exciting for me is I feel like it's inspiring me to be a better person, or to manifest the person of me that I want to share publicly. Because now I am trying to put myself out there and be a thought leader. And I think that I have just as many negative thoughts throughout the day as everyone else. But do I want to put that energy into the world? And then do I, yesterday I literally made 10 Instagram posts on one account yesterday.
I do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to Gary Vee, and he's like, if you're on Instagram in 2019, and it's 2020 now, and you're only making one Instagram post a day, and you think you're gonna grow, I'm like, all right, well, time to just commit to it.
Yeah.
But it almost is that moment of meditation. I had actually written out a post. I just started dating again for the first time. I decided to take a break from anything romantic since December and just date myself. And then I turned on a dating app, and I've been incredibly frustrated here in Miami. I matched with 11 people in one day, and 9 of them that I asked were still in their 30s and living with their mom in a way that's I'm going to complain about not having a partner, but I'm going to buy expensive handbags and still live with my mom, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just realized that I didn't want to put that negativity. I was really frustrated by it. I was like, what is wrong? Then I realized I didn't want to make that negativity in the world. And I think that helped me emotionally. It helped me figure out what it is that who I want to be, what it is that I want to perpetuate and manifest.
Yeah.
When it feels appropriate to share wins and successes, something that I'm navigating. I don't know.
but then also when it's appropriate to share what feel like failures or setbacks, because I think that I agree with you. I think I'm very conscious of what I put out there, because I don't want to put something out there that's going to, I don't want to feed the negativity. Like, I want anything I put out there to be something that might help someone, or resonate with someone, or spark a little joy. And I mean, maybe it does, maybe it sparks, maybe it's a trigger, and it reminds of something uncomfortable, but then that gives them the opportunity to turn inward and acknowledge that and heal that in a way. I don't know. But I think there are a lot of people out there who are really, really unconscious of what they're putting out there. Like, they're not even aware that, like, just the stuff that they're feeding out. But what you were saying about, 30-somethings living with their parents, and kind of that type of thing, I think that kind of plays back into, taking the leap away from a paycheck, we'll say, to really trying to build a sustainable life for yourself as an artist. The bottom line is you're going to have to sacrifice things. Like, this isn't all fun and games. It's not necessarily easy. There are things and I would say luxuries that I had in my life prior to leaving my job that I'm not able to do. I'm not able to have or sustain anymore. But I think ultimately what you find is it's like those luxuries and those little extra things that we think we need, that we fill our time and our spaces with, aren't really what's fulfilling and allowing us to have a full life and to be a good person, as you're saying,
It's so difficult. I mean, like, something that I've really been struggling with lately, and part of the reasons why I've been drawing myself inwards, and trying to date myself, is the fact that I've been in Miami for a little over a year now, and I really haven't felt like deeply romantically attracted to someone where it's like, this is someone who I'm like infatuated with, and it's been so sad. Makes me feel like I should move out of Miami or something. But I guess something that I guess I want to go back to social media for a second here is what I find really overwhelming right now is I'm trying to have real conversations with people. So, like, this is a real growth strategy. But every person that follows me, I send them a thank you message, which is like so dorky as hell. But I start a conversation with, because if someone's going to take a moment of their life to find value in what it is, then I want to have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And, I started that Instagram about a month ago, and I probably had a conversation with about 1,000 people on there, and I have at least 100 unread DMs. And it's crushing me. It's like giving me such severe anxiety to just open the DMs. Because there are people that genuinely want to talk with me and genuinely, like, want my services. It's just like so overwhelming, because you have these conversations, like the conversation that I'm having with you, it feels so valuable and so integral, and it's like I feel like we're getting something. But the other people, it's just like it feels like I'm at a convention or something. It's not that I'm putting it, but just I'm such an introvert, and it's just so emotionally exhausting.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I resonate with that. I mean, the first thing I would say is there are 4 agreements, and one of them is not to take things personally, because it's not about you. It really isn't. Like, that kind of sucks to hear too, right? It's not about you. Stop making it about you. Your feelings are valid, but their non-response probably has nothing to do with you.
Oh, no. It's not them not responding to me. It's me not responding to them.
Oh. Okay, well, I totally get that. I would be the same way.
That's what I feel.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I have, like, my Instagram DM, you just scroll and it will never...
It's never ending? Oh, yeah, that would give me severe anxiety.
And they're all things that are like conversations where it's like, really what happened was like I had about 100 conversations happening throughout a day, and then
Mm-hmm.
one day I just like didn't respond to my DMs, and now they've been piling up, and it's just become literally over 100 DMs that I haven't responded to, and I feel so bad because it's probably some of the people that are watching this. Um, I'm
Well,
not, yeah.
well, then here's my general reminder to all of you that are watching this to be gentle with Mike, because he is really doing his best and he has the best intentions. And it's, as you can see, not personal. It has nothing to do with you. He's just trying to look after himself, because that's all we can do for each other is take care of ourselves.
So, is there anything that you want to say? We're gonna wrap this up. Anything that you want to say to my audience, or that you want to ask of them?
Um, oh, I want
Selfish.
to, I wanna remind anyone who's taken the time to watch through all of this, of us talking back and forth. Um, I want to first express a great deal of gratitude to you for sitting through listening to me ramble like this, because I don't know if I would sometimes. Um, and also remind you to be gentle with yourself in this time. This is hard for all of us, and we feel really separate and disconnected in this time period right now. But I think also that's a feeling that is very familiar to artists in general. So, you know, who better to lead us into a new experience and a new world and a new normal than the artists who are familiar with this. Make stuff, share your light, even if you don't think what you're making is good, or you think someone's saying it better. You have a unique perspective, and the only obligation you really have to the world is to take care of yourself and to speak your truth. I encourage anyone that would like to reach out to me. I love having conversations. I don't have 100 unread DMs in my Instagram account right now. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say.
So, this is a two-part question, and this is clear. Where can my audience find you and your work? And what is the first part of your work that they should go to first? After, like, they're going to end this and they're going to go.
Okay. Well, the two main places that I currently show my work are online, which is great because that's what's accessible to us all right now. You can go to my artist website, which I always maintain, even if it's only like a collage of work I did 10 years ago. It's not, it's updated right now. But that is my website, which is meganrosemorrison.com. Megan is spelled with an H. Morrison is spelled with 2 R's and 1 S. But I'm sure this will all be typed out for you, so you'll probably just be able to click on the link. And then my Instagram is La Vie en Megan Rose, which is a fun play on a French saying and song about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, obviously, also my name, but also just a general, like we were talking about, manifestos for our life. That's part of my purpose, is to shine a rosy light on things and to help myself and others see things, see the silver lining, see the positive, see the good parts of life. So that's where you can see my art. My Instagram will have a lot of posts. There'll be a couple little highlights there that you can flick through some of my recent sketches and drawings that I've been working on, my mindscapes, my portals, my thresholds. You can also access my book through my website and purchase that on Amazon. It comes highly recommended by my 4-year-old goddaughter, who says she highly prefers books with pictures in them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so wonderful talking to you.